The arrow left the string with a deafening swish, slicing through the still air as it flew toward a small pack of wolves. "Damn," muttered Farvi, watching in frustration as yet another attempt to earn a few gold pieces from their pelts was foiled. The wolves, startled by the sound, scattered into the depths of the forest, their silhouettes vanishing like ghosts among the trees. Hunting in the dense forests of Montera was a far cry from the snowy expanses of Nordmad. In the icy north, the beasts were bold, often hunting you if you weren't careful. Here, the mere snap of a twig was enough to send them fleeing. With a bitter taste of defeat in his mouth, Farvi gathered what little game he had managed to catch that day, a meager haul, and began the long trek back to the port. There, he would smuggle the pelts into town, relying on a well-bribed guard to turn a blind eye. The villages offered no market for his goods, and certainly not at the prices Montera's black market was willing to pay. As he trudged along the well-worn trails near the city, Farvi's thoughts turned inward, pondering his next move. Life as an exile left him with few options. Each day was haunted by the same memory, the one fateful mistake that had led to his banishment.
Snowbora can't even stand on his feet. Pathetic.
The orc had taunted, his voice dripping with cruel amusement.
Let the coal shark leave the Mora a little gift.
The orc's blade, gleaming wickedly in the dim light, had traced a vicious path down Farvi's face, leaving a deep, reptilian scar in its wake. Young and full of defiance, Farvi had struggled desperately against the iron grip of the orc's paw, but it was no use. The orc had taken his time, savoring the pain and humiliation he inflicted on his prey. There was a sick pride in his eyes. Korshak had bested the son of the Grey Wolf himself, a feat that would be spoken of in dark taverns and whispered about in shadowy corners. When the orc had finally tired of his cruel sport, he had thrown Farvi's broken body into a snowdrift, leaving him to die in the frozen wasteland. The memory still burned in Farvi's mind, a constant reminder of the life he had lost. The scar on his face had long since healed, but the wound to his spirit had never closed. Every day, as he navigated the treacherous underworld of Montera, he felt the weight of his exile like a shackle around his soul. But survival was all that mattered now. He could no longer afford the luxury of dwelling on the past. He was a hunter, an exile, a man with nothing left to lose, and that made him dangerous. A deep breath pulled Farvi out of the traumatic vision. The icy tendrils of memory loosened their grip on his mind as a soft, feminine voice echoed in his thoughts. "Farvi," it whispered, gentle but insistent. "Night is approaching, we must go." The words immediately dispelled the terrible memories, but only for a fleeting moment. The haunting visions had been looping in his mind for months, like a curse he couldn't escape, but there was no time to dwell on it. Tears were useless. Action was the only thing that mattered now. With deliberate steps, Farvi began to approach the port gate. Night had fallen quickly, shrouding the world in darkness so thick it was hard to make out the faces of the guards. A familiar voice in his head warned him, a low hum of anxiety that sent a chill down his spine. Something's wrong. None of these guards are our friends. Instinctively, Farvi pulled the hood of his cloak further down to obscure his features. There was no turning back now. "What are you doing here, Stack? We don't want mercenaries in the city," one of the guards barked, his tone sharp and unwelcoming. Farvi remained calm, his heart pounding beneath his stoic exterior. "I'm delivering a supply of hides and meat," he said evenly. "One mistake, and I'll be filled with bullets," he thought, the tension coiling in his muscles. The guard eyed him suspiciously, his gaze narrowing. "Since when do skins come from some random slaughterer? And for the record, you don't look like a hunter to me." Farvi didn't flinch. "Malkor knows me. He can vouch for me," he replied, his voice steady but his mind racing. The guard hesitated, his eyes searching Farvi's face for any sign of deceit. "Malkor, you say? Fine, come with me." It seemed to have worked, but Farvi knew better than to relax. Let's hope Malkor will cover for me if it comes to that, he thought as he followed the guard into the port. As they moved through the dimly lit area, Farvi couldn't help but notice the large number of empty crates being loaded onto the royal galley. The sight of them piqued his curiosity. "Big shipment, huh?" he remarked, trying to sound casual. "Don't get interested. Sit down and keep quiet," the guard snapped, his tone brooking no argument. Farvi bit back any further questions, knowing better than to push his luck. Something was off, but he couldn't afford to draw attention to himself. He needed to play his part, stay under the radar, and hope that whatever was happening would pass without him getting caught in the crossfire. As work continued around them, Farvi and the suspicious guard sat down at a small table near the loading crates. The guard, eyeing him carefully, poured himself some liquor into a wooden tankard, then pulled out a notebook before calling a couple of workers to take the goods from Farvi. "So Malkor sent you, right?" the guard asked, his tone sharp. "He didn't," Farvi replied quickly. "It's just that whenever I brought the rest of the prey from the royal hunters, Malkor was always at the gate." The guard's eyes narrowed. "Well, what a coincidence then. Just as Malkor is sitting behind bars for trafficking illegal goods, you show up, a helper of the hunters, dressed in full plate armor and carrying a sword that could forge 3 more. Something doesn't add up here, warrior. Who are you really?" Farvi could feel the tension rising, but he didn't let it show. "I have to think of something fast," he thought, his mind racing. "I'm just an inept mercenary trying to make a living as a hunter," Farvi said, forcing a nervous chuckle. "As a child, I had an accident that disfigured my face, hence the mask. It's hard to strike a deal when your face resembles an orc's snout, huh?" A voice in his head congratulated him on his quick thinking, whispering words of encouragement. "Well then, Mr. Loser," the guard said with a slight smile, "I'll just need your name. We'll ask Malkor if he knows you, and if he doesn't turn you in, you're free to go. But let me add this. While you're here, keep a close eye on those walls. Your sword will hit the ground as soon as it rises, understood? Our crossbowmen will see to that." The guard patted Farvi on the back before walking away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Farvi quickly surveyed his surroundings, realizing that his fate now hinged on whether Malkor would back him up. "Only a miracle can get me out of this," he thought, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Suddenly, the night sky lit up. The northern side of the castle was bombarded by a flurry of fiery arrows, and the ominous sound of orc warhorns echoed from the main port gate. "I'm not going to die here, hands down," Farvi resolved, his pulse quickening as memories of his past tormentor, the white orc who had taken everything from him, flashed before his eyes. Seeing the crossbowman distracted by the new threat, Farvi drew his blade. The mighty weapon clanked as it left its scabbard. Around him, workers tried to flee toward the city, only to be crushed by rubble as an orc siege machine's projectile struck. There was no escape, but Farvi wasn't alone. He found himself standing shoulder to shoulder with a handful of guards, who now saw him as an ally rather than a suspect. Their focus shifted to the real enemy, the orcs who threatened far more than just some suspicious mercenary. Minutes felt like hours as they awaited the onslaught. It didn't take long. The first wave of orc warriors crashed into the guard lines with brutal force. Blood flooded the harbor as the guards fought desperately to hold their ground. The sheer intensity of the orc assault slowly began to overwhelm them. In the midst of the chaos, Farvi caught sight of a small, elven figure sneaking between the crates. A Garantian. Here. His moment of distraction proved costly. An orc's hammer struck him on the side of the head, sending him reeling. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as he stumbled back from the battlefield. From the corner of his eye, he saw an escort of paladins rushing toward the royal ship, led by a mechanical beast. A steel soldier pushing forward like a relentless zombie, arrows piercing its chest. As Farvi struggled to regain his footing, a high-ranking guard ran up to him, shouting over the din of battle. "If you want to survive, get those crates to the ship, now." Farvi didn't hesitate. He began hauling one of the crates, noticing its considerable weight. With each step, he heard a soft knocking from inside the crate, something moving within. Realization dawned on him. He was carrying an enemy of the kingdom onto the ship, but maybe, just maybe, 2 of us can get out of this alive, he thought, his mind racing as he pressed forward.